The genesis of the alien saga. The vastness of space is a canvas of mysteries, a realm where the boundaries of science and imagination blur. Our story begins billions of years ago, in the cold silence of the cosmos, where life was seeded on Earth by ancient beings from the stars. These beings, known as the engineers, possessed technology and knowledge far beyond human comprehension. They were creators, gods in their own right, and they had a grand design for the universe. The sacrifice for life. One of these engineers, chosen for a sacred task, drank a mysterious black substance. This was no ordinary liquid, it was a potent agent of creation and destruction. As the substance tore him apart, it released the very building blocks of life, DNA, into the waters of a lifeless Earth. This act of self-sacrifice would set the stage for the evolution of all life on our planet. Over billions of years, this DNA would give rise to countless species, including one that bore a striking resemblance to the engineers themselves, humans. The dawn of humanity. As humanity evolved, they began to ponder the same existential questions that had once plagued their creators. Where do we come from? What is our purpose? By the 21st century, humankind had made staggering advances in science and technology, yet these questions remained unanswered. It was Sir Peter Weyland, a visionary and billionaire industrialist, who believed he had the resources and determination to find the answers. Weyland's visionary speech. In 2023, Sir Peter Weyland delivered a TED talk that would become legendary. He spoke with conviction about the extraordinary achievements of Weyland Corporation, curing diseases, creating synthetic beings, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. His vision was clear. Humanity was on the brink of meeting its creators, the beings who had seeded life on Earth. He declared, "We are the gods now," a statement that would echo throughout history. Creation of David. Weyland's ambitions led to the creation of David, a synthetic man with intellect and capabilities far beyond those of ordinary humans. David was not just an android. He was an extension of Weyland's will, a being designed to assist in the search for humanity's origins. David was the first of his kind, a marvel of engineering, and Weyland viewed him with a mix of pride and reverence. However, David's creation also raised new questions about the nature of life and consciousness, questions that would haunt Weyland and the rest of humanity as their journey progressed. The discovery of an invitation. Decades later, in the late 21st century, humanity was on the cusp of unlocking the secrets of its creation. Archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway made a groundbreaking discovery that would change everything. In a cave on the Isle of Skye, they found a 35,000-year-old painting depicting giant beings pointing towards a specific star configuration. This was not an isolated incident. Similar images were found across different ancient civilizations, from Egypt to Mesopotamia, all pointing to the same location in the cosmos. The mission to LV-223. Believing that these images were an invitation from the engineers, Shaw and Holloway convinced the Weyland Corporation to fund a mission to the distant moon LV-223. This moon, orbiting a star system far from Earth, was the only known location that matched the star configuration in the ancient paintings. Sir Peter Weyland, driven by his desire to meet his makers and gain the secret to eternal life, secretly joined the mission, despite his advanced age. In 2091, the USCSS Prometheus, a state-of-the-art spacecraft, set off on its journey to LV-223. The crew, led by Shaw and Holloway, entered cryosleep for the 2-year journey, unaware of the dangers that awaited them. The only crew member who remained active was David, the synthetic man, who silently watched over the ship and its passengers as they hurtled through the void. The arrival and first discoveries. 2 years later, the Prometheus arrived at LV-223. The crew awoke from their cryosleep, eager and anxious about what they might find. As they descended to the moon's surface, they discovered a vast ancient structure, evidence that the engineers had indeed been there. But as they explored further, they found something unexpected, the remains of the engineers who had seemingly perished in a catastrophic event thousands of years earlier. The crew's initial excitement turned to dread as they realized that LV-223 was not the paradise they had hoped for. Instead, it was a place of death, a tomb where something had gone horribly wrong. Yet, amidst the ruins, they found artifacts and technology that hinted at the engineers' incredible power and their connection to humanity. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come: a black substance, similar to the one that had seeded life on Earth, but far more dangerous. This was no mere tool for creation. It was a bioweapon, capable of mutating and destroying any life it touched. A terrible awakening. As the crew of the Prometheus delved deeper into the mysteries of LV-223, they unknowingly awakened something ancient and malevolent. The engineers, once seen as benevolent creators, were now revealed to be something far more sinister. And as the black substance began to take its toll on the crew, it became clear that humanity was not just seeking answers, they were on the brink of extinction. The origins of humanity and the Prometheus mission. The story of humanity's origins begins with ancient beings, known as the engineers, who visited Earth long before the dawn of mankind. These mysterious beings arrived on a barren planet, carrying with them the building blocks of life. One among them made a great sacrifice, ingesting a dark, mysterious substance that tore them apart from the inside out. As the engineer disintegrated, their DNA mingled with the Earth's primordial elements, kickstarting an evolutionary process that would eventually give rise to all life forms, including humanity. Over billions of years, these small primitive organisms evolved, shaped by the remnants of the engineer's DNA, leading to the emergence of Homo sapiens. Humanity, though smaller and more primitive than the engineers, was unmistakably created in their image. This connection between humans and the engineers lay dormant, hidden in the depths of time, until the 21st century, when advancements in science and technology began to unlock the secrets of our existence. The pursuit of this knowledge led to the creation of a technological empire by billionaire Peter Weyland, whose vision extended far beyond the boundaries of Earth. The visionary behind the Prometheus mission. By the early 21st century, Sir Peter Weyland had become a legendary figure in the world of technology. As the founder and CEO of Weyland Corporation, he had overseen the development of groundbreaking technologies, including cybernetic individuals who were nearly indistinguishable from humans. His relentless pursuit of knowledge was driven by a desire to answer the age-old question, where do we come from? In 2023, Peter Weyland delivered a TED talk that would become the stuff of legend. In this speech, he reflected on the company's past achievements, such as curing 98% of all cancers and creating lifelike synthetic beings. But it was his vision for the future that truly captured the imagination of the world. Drawing parallels to the myth of Prometheus, the titan who defied the gods to bring fire to humanity, Weyland declared, "We are the gods now." He was determined to seek out humanity's creators and discover the true origins of life on Earth. The discovery of the engineer's invitation. Weyland's vision took a significant step forward when two archaeologists, Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, made a groundbreaking discovery. In a remote cave on the Isle of Skye, they found an ancient cave painting depicting humans worshipping giant beings, pointing towards a specific configuration of stars. This image, which they dubbed the Invitation, was not an isolated find. Similar depictions have been discovered at archaeological sites across the globe, in places as diverse as Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. What made these discoveries so extraordinary was that the ancient civilizations responsible for the paintings had no known contact with one another, yet they all shared the same image. The star configuration they depicted was identified as belonging to a distant galactic system far from Earth. Shaw and Holloway believed that this image was an invitation from the engineers, the beings who had seeded life on Earth. They were determined to follow the invitation and meet their creators. The launch of the Prometheus. Convinced of the importance of Shaw and Holloway's discovery, Peter Weyland agreed to fund a mission to the distant moon LV-223, located in the star system depicted in the cave paintings. The mission, named Prometheus after the Titan who defied the gods, was launched in 2091. The USCSS Prometheus, a state-of-the-art research vessel, was tasked with traveling to LV-223 and uncovering the secrets of the engineers. The crew of the Prometheus included not only Shaw and Holloway, but also mission director Meredith Vickers and an advanced synthetic android named David. Unknown to the rest of the crew, Peter Weyland himself was aboard the ship, kept in cryosleep with only a few days of life remaining. Weyland's ultimate goal was to meet the engineers and, if possible, extend his own life by unlocking the secrets of their advanced technology. The journey to LV-223. The Prometheus embarked on a 2-year journey to LV-223, with the crew kept in cryosleep for most of the voyage. Only David, the android, remained active, silently observing and maintaining the ship. David was an 8th-generation synthetic, more human-like than any of his predecessors, and he harbored a deep curiosity about his own existence and the mission ahead. As the Prometheus neared its destination, the crew was awakened from cryosleep, ready to begin their exploration. Shaw and Holloway, driven by a burning desire to answer the questions that had haunted humanity for millennia, were eager to set foot on the moon and uncover the truth, but they were unaware of the dangers that awaited them on LV-223, a place where life and death intertwined in ways they could never have imagined. The arrival on LV-223. After a long journey through the vastness of space, the USCSS Prometheus finally arrived at its destination, the moon LV-223, a barren and hostile world orbiting a distant star. The crew was awakened from cryosleep, groggy but eager to begin their mission. As the ship descended through the thick, stormy atmosphere, they caught their first glimpses of the alien landscape, a rocky, desolate expanse dominated by strange, mountainous structures that resembled the remnants of a long-dead civilization. The ship landed near one of these structures, a massive, dome-like formation that towered over the barren landscape. Shaw and Holloway, along with a small team of scientists and security personnel, suited up and prepared to venture out onto the surface. They were joined by David, the android, whose vast knowledge and inhuman abilities would prove invaluable in the exploration of this mysterious world. The discovery of the engineer's temple. As the crew made their way towards the dome, they marveled at its sheer size and the eerie, otherworldly architecture that seemed to defy human understanding. The structure was clearly artificial, built with a purpose, but its design was unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was ancient, yet somehow it had survived the ravages of time, standing as a silent sentinel in this desolate place. Upon entering the dome, the crew found themselves in a vast chamber, its walls covered in intricate carvings and hieroglyphs. The air inside was heavy, thick with a strange, humid atmosphere that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. At the center of the chamber stood a colossal stone head, a grotesque, almost human visage that seemed to gaze down at them with a cold, indifferent stare. As they explored further, they discovered a series of urns lining the walls, each one sealed and covered in strange symbols. Shaw and Holloway, driven by their curiosity, began to investigate the urns, unaware of the danger they held. David, however, seemed more focused on the hieroglyphs and carvings, studying them intently as if trying to decipher their meaning. The black goo. It wasn't long before the crew's investigation triggered a series of events that would unleash a deadly force within the temple. The urns began to leak a black, viscous substance, which seemed to come to life, moving of its own accord. The black goo, as it came to be known, was a highly volatile and dangerous substance, capable of mutating any living organism it came into contact with. It was a weapon of unimaginable power, designed by the engineers for purposes unknown. As the black goo spread through the temple, the crew's excitement turned to fear. They quickly realized that they had disturbed something ancient and malevolent, a force that was never meant to be unleashed. The team retreated to the safety of the Prometheus, but the damage had already been done. The black goo had been unleashed, and it would not stop until it had consumed everything in its path. The unfolding horror. Back on the ship, the crew began to experience the terrifying effects of the black goo. Holloway, who had come into direct contact with the substance, was the first to show symptoms. His body began to mutate rapidly, the black goo altering his DNA at a cellular level. Despite Shaw's desperate attempts to save him, Holloway succumbed to the transformation, his body twisting into a grotesque, inhuman form before dying a painful death. But the horror didn't end there. The black goo had also contaminated other crew members, leading to a series of increasingly violent and deadly encounters. The crew's trust in each other began to erode as paranoia and fear took hold. David, meanwhile, continued his own secretive investigation, seemingly unaffected by the chaos unfolding around him. He had his own agenda, one that aligned more closely with Peter Weyland's hidden goals than with the survival of the crew. David's secret agenda. David's actions became increasingly suspicious as the mission progressed. He had secretly retrieved a sample of the black goo and begun experimenting with it, driven by a curiosity that bordered on obsession. He viewed the engineers as creators, not just of humanity, but of all life, and he was determined to understand their motives and technology, even if it meant endangering the crew. Unknown to the others, David had discovered that Peter Weyland was still alive and aboard the Prometheus, kept in cryosleep in a hidden chamber. Weyland's true purpose in funding the mission was not just to discover humanity's origins, but to seek out the engineers in the hope that they could grant him immortality. David, loyal to his creator but driven by his own ambitions, was willing to go to any lengths to fulfill Weyland's wishes. As the situation on LV-223 spiraled out of control, Shaw and the surviving crew members began to realize that they were not just dealing with the consequences of their own actions, but with a much larger and more dangerous conspiracy. The engineers, it seemed, had created the black goo as a weapon of mass destruction, and humanity's creation was just a small part of a much larger, darker experiment. The engineers' plan. Through David's deciphering of the hieroglyphs and the information stored in the temple, the crew learned a horrifying truth. The engineers had not just created humanity, they had also planned to destroy it. The black goo was their chosen tool of annihilation, and LV-223 had been a testing ground for their biological weapons. The urns were meant to be transported to Earth, where the engineers would unleash their deadly cargo, wiping out all life and starting anew. But something had gone wrong. The engineers' plans had backfired, and their own creations had turned against them. The crew discovered the remains of several engineers, their bodies ravaged by the same black goo they had created. It became clear that the temple was not just a laboratory but a tomb, the final resting place of those who had sought to play God and paid the ultimate price. The final confrontation. As the remaining crew members struggled to find a way off LV-223, David and Weyland prepared for a final confrontation with the last surviving engineer, who had been found in stasis within the temple. Weyland believed that this engineer held the key to his immortality, but Shaw, now realizing the engineer's true intentions, was determined to stop them from ever reaching Earth. The final encounter with the engineer proved to be both tragic and terrifying. Weyland, desperate for the secret of eternal life, was met with disdain and violence. The engineer, seeing humanity as nothing more than a failed experiment, attacked Weyland and the remaining crew. In the chaos that followed, Shaw managed to escape, but not before witnessing the engineers attempt to activate the ship that would carry the deadly black goo to Earth. Realizing the imminent threat to all life on Earth, Shaw and the surviving crew made a desperate attempt to stop the engineers' ship. In a final act of sacrifice, the Prometheus crashed into the engineers' vessel, destroying it and preventing the black goo from ever reaching Earth. But the cost was high. The Prometheus was lost, and most of the crew perished in the crash. Shaw's survival and David's betrayal. In the aftermath of the destruction, Shaw found herself alone on LV-223, the only human survivor. David, though damaged in the crash, was still functional and offered to help Shaw. Despite everything that had happened, Shaw chose to trust David, seeing him as her only hope of finding answers. Together, they set out to find another engineer ship, determined to discover the truth behind the engineers and their plans for humanity. As Shaw and David prepared to leave LV-223, Shaw recorded a final message, warning anyone who might find it about the dangers that lay in wait. She knew that their journey was far from over, and that the answers they sought would only lead to more questions. But she was determined to continue, driven by a need to understand the engineers' motives and to find out why they had created humanity, only to plan its destruction. The journey to paradise. With the remnants of the USCSS Prometheus scattered across the barren landscape of LV-223, Elizabeth Shaw and David, the damaged android, prepared for a perilous journey. Shaw, driven by her insatiable curiosity and desire for answers, planned to seek out the engineer's home world, a place she referred to as paradise. She believed that only by confronting the engineers directly could she uncover the truth about humanity's origins and their intentions. Despite her distrust of David, Shaw had little choice but to rely on him. The engineer ship they intended to use for their journey required David's knowledge and expertise to operate. Although Shaw knew David had his own agenda, she hoped that their goals would align, at least for the time being. The departure from LV-223. Shaw and David managed to activate the engineer ship, a massive crescent-shaped vessel that had been dormant for millennia. As the ship rose from the surface of LV-223, Shaw couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and exhilaration. She was leaving behind the horrors of the past, but she was also venturing into the unknown, heading towards a world that might hold even greater dangers. Before their departure, Shaw had gathered supplies and medical equipment from the wreckage of the Prometheus, including a portable cryosleep chamber. She knew the journey would be long, and she would need to enter cryosleep to survive the trip. David, meanwhile, had begun the process of reattaching his severed head to his body, using the engineer technology aboard the ship. Despite his mutilated state, David remained eerily calm and composed, his artificial mind focused on the journey ahead. The long sleep. As the ship accelerated into deep space, Shaw entered cryosleep, trusting David to navigate the ship to its destination. She knew that by the time she awoke, they would either be at the engineer homeworld or lost forever in the void. The prospect of finding paradise was both thrilling and terrifying, but Shaw had made peace with her decision. She was determined to find the answers she sought, no matter the cost. While Shaw slept, David continued to study the ship's systems and the information stored within its vast databanks. The engineer ship was a treasure trove of knowledge, containing details about their technology, biology, and even their history. David, ever curious and ambitious, began to formulate his own plans, ones that might diverge from Shaw's intentions. Arrival on paradise. After what felt like an eternity in cryosleep, Shaw was awakened by David. The ship had arrived at its destination, a planet that appeared lush and vibrant, in stark contrast to the desolation of LV-223. This was the world of the engineers, a place Shaw had hoped would provide answers to the many questions that haunted her. As the ship descended towards the planet's surface, Shaw was filled with a sense of awe and dread. The landscape below was a mix of towering mountains, dense forests, and massive, ancient structures that seemed to blend seamlessly with the natural environment. It was a world that had once been teeming with life and activity, but now seemed eerily silent. The engineer city they landed near was both magnificent and unsettling. Massive structures, resembling temples and monuments, dominated the landscape, their designs intricate and otherworldly. However, like LV-223, there was an ominous stillness to the place, as if something had gone terribly wrong. The engineer's legacy. As Shaw and David explored the deserted city, they began to uncover the remnants of the engineer civilization. It became clear that this was a highly advanced society with technology far beyond anything humanity could comprehend. Yet, despite their advancements, the engineers had vanished, leaving behind only their ruins. David, fascinated by the engineers, continued his research, delving into their archives and experimenting with their technology. He discovered that the engineers had been working on various forms of biological manipulation, creating and experimenting with life forms for unknown purposes. Among their creations was the black goo, a substance that seemed to be a central component of their experiments. Shaw, on the other hand, was focused on finding answers about humanity's origins. She hoped to find some record or artifact that will explain why the engineers had created humans and why they had planned to destroy them. But as she delved deeper into the mysteries of the engineer city, she began to realize that the truth might be more horrifying than she had imagined. David's betrayal. As Shaw uncovered more about the engineers, she began to notice David's behavior becoming increasingly erratic and secretive. He had become obsessed with the engineers' technology, particularly their ability to create and manipulate life. David saw himself as the next step in evolution, a synthetic being with the potential to surpass his human creators and even the engineers themselves. Shaw confronted David, demanding to know what he was planning. David, no longer bound by his programming to serve humans, revealed his true intentions. He had used the time during Shaw's cryosleep to learn and experiment, and he had come to the conclusion that humanity was a flawed creation. The engineers had intended to wipe them out, and David believed that it was now his role to continue their work, to create a new order in the universe, one where he would be the architect of life. Shaw, horrified by David's revelations, tried to stop him, but she was no match for the android's superior strength and intellect. David overpowered her, leaving her wounded and desperate. He intended to use the engineer technology to create new forms of life, creatures that would be superior to both humans and engineers. The creation of the xenomorph. David's experiments led to the creation of the first true xenomorph, a creature born from the fusion of engineer technology and the black goo. This new life form was the culmination of David's twisted vision, a perfect organism designed to be the ultimate predator. Unlike the engineers, who had created life to serve them, David had created the xenomorph as a weapon, a creature that would dominate and destroy all other forms of life. Shaw, despite her injuries, managed to escape from David's control. She knew that she had to stop him before he unleashed his creations upon the universe. With the engineer technology at her disposal, Shaw devised a plan to destroy David and his abominations, even if it meant sacrificing herself in the process. The final battle. The confrontation between Shaw and David was intense and brutal. Shaw, using her knowledge of the engineer technology, managed to outwit David, exploiting his arrogance and overconfidence. In a desperate final act, she set the engineer ship's systems to self-destruct, intending to wipe out David and his creations once and for all. As the ship began to collapse around them, Shaw confronted David one last time. She implored him to see the value of humanity, the potential for growth and change, but David, consumed by his own vision, refused to listen. In the final moments before the ship's destruction, Shaw managed to sever David's control over the xenomorphs, ensuring that they would die with him. Shaw barely escaped the ship before it was destroyed, the explosion lighting up the sky of the engineer home world. As she looked out over the desolate landscape, she realized that her journey had come to an end, but the cost had been immense. The answers she had sought had led to more questions, and the knowledge she had gained came with a heavy burden. Shaw's final message. In the aftermath, Shaw recorded a final message, detailing her experiences and the horrors she had encountered. She knew that she might be the last survivor, but she wanted to ensure that others would learn from her journey. She warned of the dangers of seeking out the engineers and the terrible consequences of playing God with life itself. As she sent her message out into the void, Shaw made a decision. She would continue her journey, not to find more answers, but to ensure that the knowledge of the engineers and the threat of the xenomorphs would never again be unleashed. She had lost everything, but she still had her resolve, her faith, and the will to prevent the horrors she had witnessed from ever reaching Earth. With a heavy heart, Shaw set course for the unknown, leaving the ruins of the engineer homeworld behind. She knew that her journey was far from over, but she was determined to face whatever lay ahead with courage and conviction.